We had 10% of our public works staff cancel their holidays to come in and work over the course of the storm. And we had nearly 1,200 calls come into the public works main line, in addition to the calls that I'm sure many of us received. Every piece of equipment and personnel that was available was deployed to clear roads. And it is not too often that we get such a huge amount of snowfall in such a short period of time. So I want to thank our public works team for the work that they did to keep our city running and to keep the roadways open during the storm and during those critical few days over the holidays. There were, of course, issues here and there, but I think overall, we would all agree that the team at Public Work deserves our praise and thanks for their hard work over the course of those days. So thank you to them. We can move into the adoption of the minutes, Madam Clerk.
Yes, I have a motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Scott, resolved that the minutes of regular council meeting of December 12th, 2022 be approved.
All in favor? Motion carries.
And under agenda item 4, declaration of pecuniary interest, Councillor Spina has declared with respect to agenda item 7.11 and the associated bylaw at 12.1.8, the municipal law and bylaw enforcement officers as his employer has a contract with the city. I haven't received any others.
Any other declarations, council? Seeing none. We're moving into proclamations and delegations.
I'll just do the approval of
Oh,
agenda.
yes, of
Okay.
course.
I have a motion by Councillors Spina and Gardy, resolved that the agenda and addendum number 1 for January 9, 2023 City Council meeting as presented be approved.
All in favor? Motion carries.
Then we'll go to proclamations and delegations. Agenda item 6.1 is Children of Shingwog. And in attendance, we have Shirley Horn, Irene Barbo, and Ken Crossman.
Good evening, Ms. Horn, Mr. Crossman, and Ms. Barbo. Council, we've also got under 8.1.1, a letter requesting name change of Snowden Park to Memorial Park, and there's a resolution associated with it. Is there comments from any of the folks in the gallery? Yeah, please, Mr. Crossman, approach the mic.
Good afternoon. My name is Ken Crossman. Thank you, Mayor Shoemaker and City Council members for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. My visit here today is further to my discussion with you last year in regards to the tragedies at Snowden Park. To date, the erection of the memorial site is in progress at the location known as Snowden Park to commemorate these tragic deaths. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the City of Sault Ste. Marie, the Shingwalk Alumni Association, Virginia McLeod, and Ed Sadowski for their help in establishing this. I am here today requesting to change the name of Snowden Park to Memorial Park. On behalf of the Children of Shingwalk Alumni Association, myself and the Crossman family, we make a submission for the public record before Mayor and Council requesting that the name of the city-owned property, now known as Snowden Park, be changed to Memorial Park. Mayor and Council are aware of the Snowden Park site has a tragic history, specifically the deaths of 4 boys in the 1900s. 2 boys from the Shingwalk Indian Residential School drowned circa 1914, 1915 in a little lake that was located on a farm adjacent to the Shingwalk School site and the Shingwalk Cemetery. Their bodies were never recovered and they are still interred in Snowden Park. Their identities are currently unknown. We are in negotiations with the federal government to access records that may help us identify these 2 boys who were boys and when they died. So that on the 21st of November, 1929, a 3rd Shingwalk student, Peter Beauvais from the First Nations Oka, drowned in that pond. Peter Beauvais is buried in the Shingwalk Cemetery. On 27th of February, 1960, my brother, An Animal Cray public school student died while trying to save my younger brother, Robert, who fell into the pond. Gerald drowned and his body was eventually recovered with the help of the Sault Ste. Marie Police and Fire Department. I ask you to join us in our efforts to help to promote reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people in Canada and improve our request. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Crossman. Council, is there any questions? There is, yeah, Councillor Hollingsworth.
I just want to make a comment. Mr. Crossman, I just want to say thank you for coming tonight. And I know you've been working very closely with a person by name Ed, and to all of you, thank you. I know that it's been a long journey, and on behalf of Ward 1 and community, thank you.
Council, any other? Thank you, Mr. Crossman.
Yeah.
Council, any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, there is a resolution. Has it been read?
I have not read the motion yet. The motion is by Councillors Hollingsworth and Scott. Resolved that the request of the children of Shingwog to rename Snowden Park as Memorial Park be referred to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee for review and recommendation to council.
All in
That
favor?
door is open.
Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Crossman.
That carries unanimously.
It does.
And that will bring us to agenda item 6.2, the Christmas Lighting Awards presentation.
Okay, do we have a counselor? Typically, we have a counselor present these. Counselor Vezo-Allen.
Thank you. The Lighting Awards program, co-sponsored by PUC, promotes and encourages community involvement and recognizes the efforts of residents who light up their homes and businesses in the spirit of the season. On behalf of the Lighting Committee, I thank the residents and businesses for the work they put into their displays. It was a wonderful experience viewing all the work. Also makes me consider that I need to do better at my own house. That went into bringing some cheer and joy to our community. I would also like to thank PUC for their continued support of the program. The week of December 19th, committee members drove individually in their own vehicles to judge and review this year's nominations. So without further ado, Madison has set up a PowerPoint. I'm pleased to announce the following residences and businesses that were chosen as winners in the city's 2022 Christmas Lighting Awards program. So Ward 1, we have 98 Boundary Road, it's the Dare residence. And on 95 Indiana, it's the Metello residence. And in Ward 2, I love this place, 154 Tree Lawn, the Burns residence. Tied with 64 Lansdowne, the Taylor residence in Ward 2. Ward 3 at 300 Mill Creek, we had the Ticello residence. And 143 Palace, the Boulder Eve residence in Ward 3. First place in Ward 4 was 299 Doncaster, the Betravado residence, and it was pretty spectacular. And second place was on Blake, 169 Blake, the Rayner residence. Ward 5, 199 Allen Side Rose, the McClellan residence. And at 55 Foothill Road, the Merlino residence. And then for our businesses, Tamar Trends and Flower Shop, first place. Second place, Georgie Schwarmy, which we all love to go, best Schwarmy in town. And third place, Village Media. So plaques will be dropped off, hopefully this week by your city council members. And once again, I want to thank PUC will be issuing bill credits for the winners. And thank you for this opportunity, and thank everyone in our city for taking a lot of civic pride and making us sparkle through the Christmas season. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Councilor Vezo-Allen, and congratulations to all those winners.
That will bring us to agenda item 6.3, the Fleet Management Information System. And that refers to agenda item 8.4.2. And Banu Hurtig and Christy Amica with Mercury Associates are in the Zoom meeting.
Thank you, Madison, for putting up the slides, and thank you so much for this opportunity. So this is Banu Hurtig here, and I'm joined by my colleague Christy Amaker, and we really appreciate this opportunity to talk about the Fleet Management Improvement Initiative that's been undertaken by Public Works. And we'll just go ahead and change the slide. Thank you, Madison. So the purpose of this is to provide a recap of the Public Works journey to improve fleet management functions. There are many functions in fleet management, and when we did our practices review in 2021, we identified a number of tweaks and a number of key areas or strategic pillars, as I like to call them, for improvement. And the most important thing for us was to, and for for Public Works, was to take bite-sized pieces that rather than trying to boil the ocean all at once. So in 2022, we did do the fleet replacement plan and garage services process, and we'll provide you with the highlights of the accomplishments there. And then I will identify the next important steps for this initiative success. So the next slide, the content of this, we've tried to keep it fairly short and to the point. So we'll just do a quick recap from 2021 practices review to show you the strategic direction. And then we'll talk about the multi-year fleet improvement program. Fleet profile we'll spend a little time on, but not so much. And the replacement plan, we'll talk about the overall replacement plan. We'll talk about the Public Works baseline plan and Public Works smooth plan, replacement plan. So, and then we'll provide you with some process improvement highlights, critical factors of success, and next steps. And there are appendices included for your reference. One talks about the fleet profile as we determined in 2021, and Appendix B is a little more information about Mercury Associates. So here's the, in a pictorial form, we've provided the 4 strategic pillars that are really important for improving fleet functions and the processes and the procedures. So in the top quadrant, you're going to see fleet renewal, and that's to do with renewing what appears to be quite an aging fleet. So we have developed a practical or smooth, I use those terms interchangeably, a practical replacement plan, and the capital funding, which is also part of the staff report that Ms. Hamilton Beach has prepared. And the other part of it is to eliminate underutilized and low criticality assets. So that this talks to really the right sizing of the fleet, which cannot take place until the fleet renewal happens. The second quadrant to the right is garage resources. So there we, what we had identified, again, rolled up at a summary level, was facility improvement, the need for a parts specialist, streamlining of procedures, and potentially outsourcing strategy. And I'll cover off what we were able to accomplish in 2022. The financial management is about chargeback rate development, annual update of rates, a realistic budget, rather than almost a placeholder budget. The core enablers is where we'll also focus today, and that is a purpose-built fleet management information system. Currently, the data is not residing all in one place, so there's no system of record per se, and there's a lot of manual work going on, and any workflow, garage workflow requires a purpose-built fleet management information system. So if you could please go ahead to the next slide. So this is what we envisioned as a multi-year fleet improvement program. So of course, 2021, we did the detailed practices. By we, in this case, I mean Public Works and Mercury. We did the detailed practices review. In 2022, we've completed the fleet renewal plan and capital budget requirement for Public Works. Garage services improvement, we've established a future mode of operation, and we prepared the business requirements. They've been established. And how that will help is when the time comes to procure a new fleet management system, the business requirements can simply be attached to the request or proposal or whatever procurement process is used, so that Public Works ends up with a really good system that matches the requirements at hand. And then in 2023, the focus will be on the FMIS. So generally speaking, FMIS selection and procurement and implementation can take about a year. The entire end-to-end process can take about a year. So we identified two staff at Public Works the capital budget requirements to start the FMIS work. So please go ahead to the next slide. So just a quick review, if you will, of what the fleet consists of. So you can see that there are 298 active units, and we use the term vehicle equivalent unit to calculate demand hours, technician demand hours, and so on. So basically, this methodology normalizes all vehicles to come up with the total demand hours and therefore the number of required technicians. So we'll often talk about VEUs as versus active units. So there's not much more to say except that there are about 300 active units and there are about 840 vehicle equivalent units in the current fleet. Go ahead to the next slide, please. So this is an interesting slide from the point of view that is showing the age by client groups. So their fleet, how old it is, what their target was to have it replaced by, and what the de facto or actual replacement cycle ends up being. So for example, you can look at the parks histogram, and you'll see that their target, so the orange bar, it represents what the target replacement cycle was, and the blue indicates what it actually is. So you can see that for every client, the de facto replacement cycle is actually much higher than the target. So what this really indicates is the fleet is aging. The maintenance and repair costs are going up. Downtime, vehicle or asset downtime is going up, and so on. So, and this is what led us to the need for the replacement plan. So please go ahead to the next slide. So the first chart here, or this chart here, is the baseline, and it shows it by the client group. So landfill, leased assets, sanitary fleets, works fleet, and so on. This is a baseline plan, so it's not necessarily a very practical or smooth plan, but we just wanted to give you a sense of what it looks like. So once we have this and we discussed it with Public Works and also city's finance people, it was determined that we needed to focus on the Public Works fleet, for which we have developed the baseline and the smooth replacement plans. So please go ahead to the next 2 slides, or next slide. Thank you. So this is the baseline plan for the Public Works group. And you can see that in 2023, something in the order of $12 million would be required to get rid of the backlog. By backlog, we mean vehicles and assets that should have been replaced but have not been replaced. So clearly, this is not a practical way to go. And just want to highlight, this is only for Public Works. So if you could go to the next slide. So after quite a lot of back and forth with staff, with city staff, we came up with this smooth, what we call the smoother practical plan. And what it does, it distributes the backlog over 3 years to 2025. And you can see that with the 3 red histograms right at the beginning of the chart. And this represents, those 3 charts represent a funding of 3.3 million, 3.4 million, and 3.53 million respectively for 2023, 2024, and 2025. So please go ahead to the next. So that was the replacement plan. Now we're talking about process improvements and so on. So we did hold collaborative in-person work sessions to prioritize something like 60 functional areas. This is just for the garage services. So, and we used like an impact weighting methodology to score them. And based on that, we were able to come up with what you see in the last bullet as the 3 main areas to focus on what do we want the future to look like conceptually, and then develop the business requirements for each of those. So we also identified in the process, we noticed that there are some interim steps that could be taken for garage process and facility improvements, which I believe the Public Works staff is enacting as we speak. And some things have been, in fact, completed. So that was a nice, if you will, a side benefit of this exercise. There were some things that could be done almost immediately, and we didn't have to wait for the fleet management information system. We also provided to staff facility improvement areas, and we provided some cost estimates for wash bays and system, and as well as garage lifts. The high priority functions, which I referred to earlier, are preventive maintenance and inspection. So what does that program look like? It's all documented now. What do we want the future to look like is documented. And then there's parts management, which we've also produced a business requirements document for. And then we have overall maintenance and repair, in which we've included key performance metrics for garage services. So this was all done. It sounds simple here, but it takes a lot of debate and a lot of work back and forth, pros and cons analysis, to be able to document. Excuse me. I just need to take a lozenge because I'm fighting COVID. So, and my throat and my voice is giving out. I'm so sorry. Okay, so the next slide, please. In the process of doing this work, we also identified that a governance guideline document was required, because without having some sense of who is responsible for what, how the overall fleet will be governed, etc., things will soon go back to the way they were. So we have created this document, and it was accepted by Public Works staff. We for the FMIS, we did provide a budget requirement, and this is an estimate of about $185,000. There's some consulting fees, and then estimates for, if the successful bidder of the FMIS needs to travel. One-time implementation cost is estimated at $50,000. And depending on the technology model that's adopted or that's procured by the city, there may be, around $40,000 required as an annual expenditure. Nobody will know that until the RFPs are created and the procurement process is completed. We also prepared together, we prepared communication plan and presentations in the context of change management. This is, any change is difficult, we know that, but what we're proposing are some fairly conceptually different ways of doing things. So change management becomes even more so important. So please go ahead and change the slide. So the critical factors for success, of course, senior leadership and council support are really important. We really highly recommend a systematic and methodical approach, and to manage this multi-year improvement initiative as an overall program. There are projects that intertwine or have cross impacts, so that all has to be managed as an overall program. A sufficient funding for fleet renewal, that's our replacement plan that we've already talked about, and fleet management information system. Obviously, this work cannot be done without staff, without Public Works and other supporting department staff. So sufficient resource availability is very key. Change management steps, support from all stakeholders, active engagement of fleet services employees is a must. Procurement and implementation of a purpose-built fleet management information system, and of course, the adoption and utilization of the governance guidelines for fleet management. Please go ahead and change the slide. So the next steps, I think they're fairly obvious, but it makes for a nice conclusion. What we're suggesting is Public Works Fleet Services continue with the interim garage services work that they're doing, that improvements that they're making. And these may be something very simple, like the lighting in the garage, for example. Or it may be fairly complex, like how to open and close a work order in the garage, and when to do it, and who has the authority to do it. So those are the types of things that are work in progress, if you will. And then obtain council approval for additional fleet capital. This is a prerequisite for maintenance and repair cost management. So this is the replacement plan. The newer the fleet, the more fuel efficient assets you're going to have in your fleet, and the less need for maintenance and repair. Enact fleet renewal immediately. So this is for the Public Works staff. They will enact the fleet renewal program, which is laid out vehicle by vehicle, what they need to replace, and so on. It's laid out asset by asset, so they have all the details, and so they can enact it right after the capital funding is released. The right side, we in 2021, we also did a right sizing study, which had a critical dependency, and that was fleet renewal. So once the renewal is well underway, we suggest revisiting the right sizing study and actually starting to eliminate some assets from the fleet. Then the next item is for the fleet management information system. This is, to me, this is one of the building blocks that is just absolutely mandatory for any, for not just improving performance, but also measuring performance. So it's almost impossible to do key performance metrics without a fleet management system that will support that. Support, I'm going to say, almost close to automatic way of doing it rather than manually, manipulating the data. So the plan for the, assuming the budget is approved, the plan for the new FMIS implementation needs to start quickly in order for the RFP or whatever method procurement is going to suggest to enact that right away. And thereafter, of course, we will need to also develop business requirements for functions that have not been really addressed as yet. And those would be things like asset lifecycle management, fuel management, data exchange requirements with the city's enterprise systems, and so on. So that work still has to be done. The garage services part is well under control and it's done, but there are other fleet functions that we haven't yet addressed. And then adoption and utilization of the fleet management governance guidelines. So that pretty much, as I mentioned, there are 2 appendices that I'll give you that are for your background information about Mercury and about some of the costs and clients from our 2021 practices review. So this concludes our presentation. So if there are any questions, we can try to address them now or.
Thank you, Ms. Herdig. And hope you've recovered or well on your way to recovery from COVID.
I am. Thank you so much. Yeah.
I've got Councillor Hollingsworth has questions.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. First of all, this is very exciting. This is well overdue, and I'm very happy for Ms. Hamilton Beach and Mr. Larry Girardi. Public Works, as our mayor said earlier, is very important. We do appreciate all they do for snow plowing and basically the 4 seasons. What I'm really happy to see in this presentation is that you touched on how we have to think of the future and how the future and technology is changing. And yes, it's very difficult for us to know what the next 10, 20 years will look like, and we'd be guessing. But if I may say, I think we're kind of behind the 8 ball right now when it comes to using the best practices and best technology. So this brings me to my first question. I just want you to elaborate. You touched on it briefly, but fuel consumption is very important. And I know that Public Works is very good at measuring fuel, measuring efficiencies. So when you refer to trucks and the equipment, I'm under the impression that there's going to be, I hate to use the word bells and whistles, but there's going to be very up-to-date bells and whistles. Can you comment on how we can make sure that if we invest into this new trucks and equipment, that we will have the best practices for fuel efficiencies? As my first question.
Okay, so the EPA, the Environment Protection Agency, it's mandated OEMs to, every year they have to up their game. Every year they have to improve the fuel economy of the vehicles they're producing by 2% or more. So just by virtue of buying new vehicles, you'll be getting more fuel efficient vehicles and assets. So that's one of the very important reasons why fleet renewal is a very, very important program. So that's one part. If I understand your question correctly, measuring fuel consumption goes hand in hand with published, if you will, published fuel economy numbers. So a purpose-built fleet management information system, FMIS, allows you to do that, assuming you have the right fuel monitoring systems in place, or you get data files from your fuel suppliers. That can be incorporated in the FMIS, and then almost by vehicle, you can measure the consumption, compare it to its cohort, and benchmark those numbers. So, but without the data, it's difficult to improve anything. And that's just my humble opinion. So that's the way I would address your question. And sorry, I forgot the etiquette of saying through you, Mr. Mayor, for the Councillor Hollingsworth before I
no
started
worry.
to answer the question.
No worry, no worries.
That's great. And I know that I'm sure that if not today, in the future, that Ms. Hamilton Beach and Mr. Larajari will probably add on to that. Going back to my second question, alternate fuels are the future. When you were looking at upgrading our equipment, obviously you'll be taking consideration alternate fuels and also basically going to electric.
So unfortunately, what's happening in the industry by OEMs, they're not moving very rapidly, or if at all, towards alternate or towards electric for the specialized equipment. So sedans, yes, or even some trucks, yes, they can be considered. But the practicality of the matter right now, and I'm just sharing what the industry trend is here. So they are available from the OEMs, but the waiting time is very long. Okay. So yeah, so and generally speaking, the capital dollars are much higher to get a hybrid or to get an electric vehicle, and the wait times are long. And that's even just for the consumer side. So these are so alternate fuel, very much something to consider, and we support alternate fuel, but then you have to marry that with the reality of the situation. So I'm sure staff, when they're looking at the replacement vehicles, they will ask, is this vehicle available in electric? Is this and so on. So that's my short answer on that.
Okay.
You know, CNG, compressed CNG is a really great alternative fuel as well, but it requires a whole different infrastructure, right from maintenance and repair infrastructure for safety reasons, right? So nothing comes for, and that infrastructure requirement, in my humble opinion, is it in place? So for example, if you go with electric, is charging infrastructure in place conveniently? So those are many, there are many considerations, but we totally support exploring alternate fuel vehicles, availability, what infrastructure is required, organizational readiness for them, etc.
Okay, thank you. And I just two quick questions. I'm glad you commented on basically the garage. In my reading, I know that there's many new designs that are more efficient. For example, having more service bays per technician that can deal with light duty versus heavy, and having more modern hoists when you need to repair equipment. But also I'm hoping that as we move forward on the garage design, that we do sustainable designs that will be more of a green building and maybe potentially have a LED or LED certification. Again, you don't need to comment on that, but just mentioning overall, I know our staff in Public Works is very much green, pro-green. And my last question is going to back to the equipment, versatile equipment. Maybe someone can comment on if we and when we do purchase new equipment, I hope it's versatile for all 4 seasons. I know that in the past we talked about ice chunks. I have to bring this up. Ice chunks when we are snow plowing, and the large ice chunks unfortunately sometimes end up in our constituent driveways. And I know that there's some equipment out there that is in a pilot project where they can help minimize the ice chunks. So I'm hoping that as we replace the vehicles, we get more versatile equipment that can take care of this. And that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Girardi, Mrs. Hamilton Beach, and Michelle. Regarding the capital funding of 3.3 million, 3.4 million, and 3.53 million for the next 3 years, is this money also, is this amount included, for instance, for 2023, Public Works does come with a capital funding to purchase new vehicles or lease new vehicles? Is this over and above?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, this is new funding and it's a new requirement for Public Works. So you will see some items in the operating and capital budget to address these new requirements.
So it's over and above? For instance, last year, what do you recall what we spent on the capital funding for new equipment?
I don't have the number in front of me. I think it was 1.34.
So if we average about 1.34, 1.5 million, is this an additional 3.3 million for 2023 and additional 3.4 million on top of that money, or is it, it's a total?
No, that's the total. So it's
Okay.
an incremental amount between the 1.34.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bruni. Councillor Venezuelan.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to probably Mr. Girardi or Ms. Hamilton Beach. My questions are around the fleet management information system. I think that's really important in terms of managing fleet. So just a couple of questions. It says in your report that there has been consultation with finance and IT. So just a quick reality check. Can our current IT infrastructure support the database, or will there need to be improvements so that that can happen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Venezuelan. As again, a very team approach we're taking to this, we certainly will rely on our consultant, at least we hope to spec it out for us. We understand it will be a cloud-based system is generally how they are being set up currently and what would be recommended. And I think we would be looking at IT largely as a resource to make sure that we do have seamless connection, et cetera, where in fact they would be required. So.
And in terms of the actual managing of the database, I mean, databases are a wonderful thing if you update them and make sure that there's someone that has ownership for it and has accurate inputting. So will there be a dedicated person, or how is that going to work out if you go into the fleet management information system?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Venezuelan, I may rely on Mrs. Hertig to provide her expertise. She has set up many for many communities. So from a standpoint of transitioning to our level, she may be able to provide some comments there.
Right. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, the answer is at implementation time, there is a one-time effort, if you will, to transition to the new system. So the databases are existing databases are used as a starting point. They're cleansed. They're, by cleansed, I mean, we make sure that the data is correct, and then it's put into the system. Once the system is up and running, it's every functional area in fleet management that will keep it up to date. So, for example, a technician in the garage, They will open a work order to do their work. And they will include on it parts, labor, what the reason codes were. Was it an accident as the reason code? Was it normal maintenance and repair? Was it sublet? By sublet, we mean outsource. So the FMIS is a living and breathing thing, and it's updated by the functional person responsible for that. So let's suppose vehicle A got replaced by vehicle B. The asset management clerk would put in the new vehicle, indicate that it's a new active vehicle, and disable or make the old vehicle inactive. So it's a living and breathing thing, where we also need to establish rules and methods is with the exchange of the information exchange or data exchange with the enterprise system. And so those will need to be defined as well. So again, it's a living and breathing thing, and there's no one person that's responsible for keeping everything up to date.
Okay, so it's a dynamic system that you
Correct.
can input. So my
Yeah,
question, I guess, just would be, so say, there's someone in procurement, deletes a vehicle, adds another vehicle, but there was an error. Like, is there sort of safeguards in place? Because we're all
yes.
human, we all make mistakes. So
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
in fact, the best in class systems are really menu driven. So it avoids a lot of what I call finger problems.
I do those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of the functions are menu driven. So the person will have to select a menu item rather than having to key in information.
Okay. Thank you very much. I
So-
don't have any other questions. That answers my questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Dufour?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. My question's for Ms. Hamilton Beach, Mr. Girardi, or Michelle. Do we have the 2022 actual number for our PWT repairs and maintenance amount that we spent last year yet?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour. I believe the latest I have here is for 2021. I believe in total, we were at approximately 2.8 million. And this is in the ballpark of 1.2 million over what was budgeted.
So we spent 1.2 million more in repairs and maintenance, and what's being asked for is an incremental 500,000 a year increase for capital. I guess probably can't answer this right now, but it would be reasonable to expect the repairs and maintenance budget to come down at a certain point as the fleet replacement plan is implemented.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour. Certainly that is the trend, which I believe both our consultant and ourselves would deem reasonable.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Any other councillors with questions on this agenda item? Okay, seeing none. Is there a vote?
There is a motion. I will just bring it up. It is a motion by councillors Hollingsworth and Gardy. Resolved that the report of the Director of Public Works dated January 9, 2023 concerning fleet management improvement initiatives be received, and that council recommend funding of the smooth replacement plan displayed in figure 2 for 2023 budget with support in principle for 2024-2025 funding. Further, if council approves the 2023 capital budget and funding for the fleet management information system during budget deliberations, that the project consulting fees in the amount of $120,000 be single source to Mercury Associates. And I will open that for vote.
Okay. All in favor? Motion carries.
And that will bring us to agenda item 6.4, core asset management plans for wastewater, stormwater, and roads and bridges. There is a presentation, and Rick Talviti and his colleagues from ACOM are also on the call.
Okay, so we've got your presentation up in front of us.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. It's a pleasure to have an opportunity to be with you this afternoon to present the city's asset management plan for its core assets. My name is Rick Talvidi. Some of you may know me from past presentations at council. I'm the manager of the local office of AECOM, and I also manage our Northern Ontario operations. AECOM is a large global consulting engineering firm with significant focus on municipal infrastructure, and our local office has been delivering engineering services for the city of Sault Ste. Marie for over 4 decades. Personally, myself, I've been involved with your infrastructure for well over 3 decades now, and I have considerable in-depth knowledge of many of your assets. And I am joined here today by Chris Lombard, who is our Canadian asset management lead, and one of his team members, Donghui Liu, who has helped in developing this asset management plan. So Chris and his team work together to compile a significant inventory of all of your core assets. And Chris is going to be delivering the presentation this evening. So after that brief introduction, I will turn it over to Chris and he can proceed with the presentation.
Thank you, Rick. And I can presume everybody can see my screen. Rick, just say thumbs up.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors. I have a brief presentation, which is a summary, like Rick said, of our core asset management plans we developed for wastewater, stormwater, roads and bridges. And the agenda that I'm going to be covering would be looking at the asset management methodology that we applied, the core asset portfolio, i.e. the assets that are sitting within your asset inventory, within those core asset portfolios, and then looking at the asset management plan components consisting of the state of infrastructure, the asset lifecycle strategies, and then finally the funding strategies. And at the back end, I'll be happy to take any questions there might be. So the reason why the city is doing these asset management plans is to be in compliance with the Ontario Regulation 588/17, which is the asset management regulation that requires Ontario municipalities to have asset management plans in place for its core assets by the middle of last year. And so these plans were submitted to meet that deadline. The other component of that regulation would be that the city has asset management plans in place for its non-core assets by the middle of 2024. And then probably most importantly, by the middle of 2025, the city needs to have asset management plans in place for all its assets, including service levels that are linked to funding and strategies to actually sustain your assets in a responsible, sustainable manner into the future. So these core asset management plans is really helping the city to be in compliance with Ontario 588/17. So the components of or the questions that we help to answer for this asset management plan is shown on the screen there. The 5 questions there. The first one is looking at the state of infrastructure. So we developed a very detailed asset inventory of the literally tens of thousands of assets that the city has in the core asset categories. We assess the condition. We use desktop information where available, and we also did a detailed videoing and condition assessment of all the city's roadways. And where other condition assessment information was available from, for example, your breach assessment reports, we incorporate that information into our assessment. Based on that, we determined the residual life of the assets. So that helped inform the state of infrastructure. The next step was to define the service levels. So the service levels are the descriptions of the quality and the extent of the services that are provided through these by means of these core assets. Then the third question that we answered was, what are the lifecycle strategies? So that looked at the asset acquisition strategies, operation and maintenance, how the city renews and replaces its assets, and what sort of strategies need to be in place to dispose of your assets in the future. Then all of that helped inform the funding needs, the funding requirements. So we developed a funding profile, at least a 10-year profile for all your assets. And then for the long-lived assets like the sewer assets and the stormwater assets, we developed also a 50-year funding profile. Then once we've done all of that work, we had a good understanding of where the city sits in terms of its asset management capabilities, and we made a couple of recommendations for improving its asset management capabilities into the future. And that touched on aspects of condition assessment, improving your condition understanding of your assets, improving the asset data, and so forth. Now, the first slide, the next three slides look very much the same, but it's a summary of the state of infrastructure. This one shows the state of infrastructure of your stormwater assets. You have 39,000 assets within the stormwater, sorry, in the wastewater category. The total replacement value is $1.8 billion, and it consists of the wastewater treatment plants, the west end and the east end wastewater treatment plants. You've got 25 sanitary pump stations, and then the biggest component really is sitting within the conveyance system, actually the pipe system, which consists of the sewers, the gravity and the force mains and so forth, the service connections that connects the houses to the sanitary system, and then the manholes and chambers. So like I said, we conducted a desktop condition assessment of your assets, and your condition of your wastewater system is actually looking pretty good. We applied a consistent 1 to 5 point rating scale across all the asset classes, so you'll be able to compare the condition between the different asset classes. And in this case, the condition states go from very good, a brand new asset, or asset really good condition, to the very poor asset that's beyond its service life and not in a state of good repair. So you can see your sanitary assets are actually in really good condition, with 70% sitting in the very good state, and then 17% in the good state. But like all asset classes, there are always a couple of assets that are beyond its expected service life, or that are in a poor condition, and you've got 8% of your sanitary assets within the very poor condition state, and 3% in a fair state. And you can imagine, as an asset ages, and if you do not consistently renew and replace the assets, the pie will change, the colors of the pie will change to have more assets within the good and the fair and the poor and very poor category. So the objective of the asset management plan is really to help arrest any aging of the assets and help advise the city on when and how to spend money to sustain the good high quality condition of your assets. So the next graph shows the stormwater system. In terms of the stormwater system, you've got 68,000 assets. Divided up into the categories of the conveyance system, the pump stations, and the stormwater other assets. The total replacement value is $1 billion in total, and the conveyance system consists of the sewers, the linear assets, the service connections, the culverts, the ditches, the manholes, the catch basins, and so forth, and also a big investment in the city's aqueducts to convey the stormwater. You have a pump station consisting of structural, process, mech, electrical, and so forth, and then other stormwater assets consist of the snow dumps, the ponds, the rain gauges, and the seawalls. Your stormwater system is also in a very good condition, 83% in a very good condition and 9% in a good condition. And then a very small portion of your assets by replacement value sitting in the very poor condition state, and some in 6% in the poor condition state. Then the final graph that I have here in terms of the state of infrastructure would be the transportation assets, or the road system. We have 1,320 assets within the road system. And $700 billion, $700 million invested in your roads assets, of which 1,270 assets sit within your roads inventory, divided up between your arterial, collector, local, and rural roads. And then you have a couple of bridges, 49 bridges of a value of $0.08 billion, divided up into vehicular bridges and pedestrian bridges. In terms of the road condition summary, like I said, we did a full video based condition assessment of all your roads assets, and converted what we saw in the videos to pavement condition index according to the Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure guidance provided. And your condition of your roadways consists of 14% in the very good category 27%, 37% of your roads by replacement value sitting in the fair condition, then 20% and 2% sitting within the poor and very poor categories. Then your bridges are actually in really fairly good condition, 32% of the bridges in very good condition, 51% in good condition, and then 17% in fair, and nothing within poor or very poor. So the next step of our exercise looked at the different life cycle strategies, and this graphic is just a graphical representation of the typical life cycle of an asset and the expenditures that you see along the life of the asset. On the vertical axis would be the cost, the y-axis. On the x-axis or horizontal axis, you look at the life of the asset. So the outset of the asset, when you acquire the asset, or the acquisition phase, you spend some capital cost to construct or procure the asset. And then you can see there's some operation and maintenance costs associated with the asset, the O&M cost. Then at some stage, halfway through the life of the asset, you might want to have spent some money on the asset to renew the asset. And then after that, you spend some more operation and maintenance costs to sustain the asset. But at some stage, maybe towards the end of the life of the asset, the O&M cost becomes not sustainable to keep on spending money on an aging asset, or the technology is not adequate to sustain the asset. So you decide to renew and replace the asset. So you can see the costs at the bottom are all the individual costs, but if you add that up, the cumulative cost, as this line at the top shows the cumulative cost of the asset. And the takeaway from the slide is the total cost of the asset over the whole life of the asset could be, in many cases, quite a number of multiples of the initial acquisition cost. So our recommendation to clients are always to be sure and to be cognizant of the total lifecycle cost of the asset before you actually go towards procuring the asset itself. So the next couple of slides just show our recommendation on the full funding need, the capital funding needs for sustaining your assets, and this is for your wastewater assets. So our recommendation on the wastewater assets would be to spend $28 million per year on average over the next 10 years. We can see the big spike, and we saw a similar spike in the fleet presentation just before me. And these are just assets that are in poor condition or beyond its expected service life. So mostly conveyance or gravity mains, and then some service connections as well that are beyond its expected service life. And then the rest of the expenditure over the next 10 years would be pretty much conveyance, a little bit on the treatment plants, and so forth. So this is for the wastewater assets. The next would be for the stormwater assets. And the same kind of picture. Some of the assets are beyond its expected service life already at this moment. And that's where we see this backlog expenditure required in the first year of expenditure, with a total average expenditure over the next 10 years of $7.1 million, mostly related to replacement of sewers, and then some for driveway culverts, and then ongoing expenditure for maintaining and sustaining the aqueducts as well. And then small pieces here and there, catch basins leads, for example, here in 2032, sorry. Then second to last bar chart for the funding, this would be for the roads asset. And our recommendation would be that the city spends $11.2 million on renewing and replacing its roads, divided in terms of reconstruction. The dark green, the orange would be, or the brown would be reconstruct and rehabilitation, and then some rehabilitation, and the gray, and then a little bit of preservation as well. But for a total average expenditure of about $11.2 million per year for the next 10 years. Then finally, for the bridges, like I said, your bridges were in pretty good condition. So a fairly low expenditure recommendation there. A couple of bars showing up in 2023, 2027, and 2032 for total average expenditure of $300,000 per year on the bridges. Now, a question, my last slide here, the question that I always get when I do these presentations is, how does my municipality's condition of assets compare with other municipalities or my neighboring municipalities or my peer municipalities? And how does the expenditures that I need to spend on my assets compare with other municipal peer agencies out there? Now, we looked at the Canadian Infrastructure Report Card that came out in 2019. And for this graph, we show the average by dollar value of assets sitting within the good to very good condition categories. So think back to those pie charts that I showed before. And generally, the first bullet that I show here, indications are that the city of Sault Ste. Marie's core assets are in a better condition than its municipal peers, other than for its roads assets. You can see you've got bridges showing up here. On the left-hand side, we show the Canadian average, the dark green, and the light green would be the city of Sault Ste. Marie's assets that are sitting within a very good condition. So you're looking, it's actually looking really, really good compared to your municipal peers, other than for the roads, where your roads, 41% of your roads are in a good to very good condition, whereas your municipal peers across the country would be sitting at 51%. So final comments here would be, these assets are continuously aging, and increased capital funding for the core assets are required to sustain the high quality of service that the city's customers are accustomed to, helping to manage risk and avoid unexpected asset failures, and ultimately helping to ensure the long-term sustainability of the city's $3.5 billion investment in its core assets. Right, so that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lombard. Council, any questions? Councillor Spina?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Lombard or perhaps Mr. Girardi, maybe. The assets that you identified that are in very poor condition or poor condition, essentially going back a few slides to the, I believe it's the wastewater treatment slide, in fact, that I'm looking at. Do you know what those are? Can you share what those are? What are the facilities that are in very poor or poor condition?
I believe
Yes.
those. Yes, okay, Mr. Lombard can answer, but I believe from a staff perspective, either him or our Commissioner of Engineering, Carl Rumio.
Okay. Either or.
Okay, I'll take a crack. Councillor, through Mr. Mayor. Those assets are, there's quite a number of assets or linear sewer assets and service connections that were installed prior to 1965 that are currently beyond its expected service life. So theoretically, those assets are ones that need to be replaced. And then there are also some assets at the treatment plants that are beyond its expected service life. These are maybe here and there, a couple of mechanical, electrical assets and so forth. But the biggest portion of these assets that are in a poor condition are assets, linear assets that are theoretically beyond its expected service life at the moment.
Okay, sorry, just having a bit of a hard time hearing on this end, but I think what I heard were service connections. I think I heard linear service connections that were made before 1965, and those are potentially beyond their life expectancy. And I heard something about treatment facility, or did I hear that?
Yeah, Chris, maybe I can just jump in there quickly too, because one of the things on the facility side, you guys have done some major upgrades. You're currently finishing up a major upgrade to your West End sewage treatment plant. There was a rebuild of the East End sewage treatment plant in the mid-2000s, and there's been some ongoing upgrades to a lot of your pump stations. So a lot of what we call your vertical infrastructure or your facilities are in pretty good shape. So yeah, the backlog at this point in time is really the underground sewers that are within your road corridors. So between the sewers and the service connections from the sewer to the homes is largely where the backlog of remedial work is required.
Okay, and thank you for bringing up the West End and the East End treatment facilities. I understand there's a large scale project that's happening at the West End facility, and there was one several years ago at the East End. Can you tell me about the East End facility? I know there's some challenges there. Where does that fit in this pie chart here in the good to fair, poor, very poor? I've done a tour there, and I know where those challenges are. So I'm just wondering where that fits in our plan for repairing it.
Right. So there are, with any facility, complex facility such as your East and West End sewage treatment plants, there's always going to be an ongoing need for upgrades to various components, and part of it, as Chris had mentioned earlier, relates to, in some respect, to technology. But with a facility like that, there's a large range of estimated service lives with the various components that make up those plants. In other words, you may have some components with only a 10-year service life, and then obviously the structures themselves may, have 60 to 70 years of service life. So there are a number of components that are going to require renewal on an ongoing basis that have a shorter lifespan. And right now at the East End plant, there are a few components. For example, the UV disinfection system is currently proposed for upgrades simply because there will no longer be any spare parts for the current system that you have there in several years' time. Mm-hmm. So there will be a need to replace the UV system there. And there's some technological changes related to some of the sludge mixing that is ongoing at the East End plant. So there is an upgrade plan for some of the mixing equipment there. So on an ongoing basis, yeah, there will typically be components within each of those facilities that will require attention sort of on an ongoing basis, just because the service lives are shorter for some of that equipment.
Sure. And through you, Mr. Mayor, I think potentially to staff on this one, I don't think that's exactly where I was going with my question. I know there's some challenges with some of the actual physical structures that are there. We know that we do receive complaints on a ongoing basis from different smells coming from that facility. And there's an issue with some of the capping that goes over some of the water treatment pools. And there's an issue with one of them where it's a bit offset on one of the corners where it's being drawn into the ground. Where does that fit in on the red, yellow, green, orange, that structure there? And when do we need to replace that is more specific what my question is.
I think I can jump in here through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Spina.
I think we got Mr. Rumiel's mic. Sorry, it looked like he was looking to answer that.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Spina. I will turn it over to Catherine as Ms. Tato has chimed in there, but I think you're referring to some ongoing processes and ongoing maintenance that there from time to time could be failures in some equipment, and those are dealt with through our sanitary sewer advisory consultants, and PUC is our operator. Those are going to happen. Those are things that we deal with, and there have been some issues that I believe that's what you're talking about, the East End plant in recent years, which are just expected over the life of the facility, and we're working through that. It doesn't mean that it's higher on these are age-based assessments, and relatively speaking, the East End plant is still fairly new and wouldn't fit in on the poor category of the asset management program. So I can turn it back over to Catherine and the consultant if I've misspoken any of that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Spina. There are a couple other projects that are outside of the scope of the asset management report. We're looking at some issues with the primaries right now, and I think you alluded to some of the odor complaints that we've received recently. So we're currently working on some assessments of that, and that will be in our capital program in the coming years to fix those structural issues. We also have some ongoing operational work that we're looking at for looking at the biofilter, just due to the nature of the age, to ensure that the system is functioning at its peak capacity, and dependent on the results of that study, there may be some recommendations that come out of it.
Okay, thank you. I'll wait those recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spina. Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment, a general comment. I thank you for the report. I know during my campaign, and probably 9 other councillors here, what we did here is our road conditions. A lot of complaints about the condition of our roads. And if you look at the graph here, we're at 41%. The city of Sault Ste. Marie and the Canadian average is at 51%. So hopefully we can, come budget time, we can try to find some type of funding to put towards the improvement of our roads. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bruni. Any other councillors with questions or comments? Councillor Caputo.
Yeah, I just have a question through you, Mr. Mayor, to I'm not even sure who I would direct this to, but it's about the state of the roads, and I'm just wondering how this assessment was done. Like, are we talking about the surface of the roads? How deep did we go? Like, I know I heard a lot of complaints about, us not digging deep enough or whatever it is. I'm not an asphalt expert, but can we just sort of get the gist of like how that's assessed with the roads?
Yeah, Councillor, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll try to answer the question. So we conducted a detailed video assessment of all the roadways. So we pretty much drove up and down every roadway and took videos of the roads. Then back in the office, we used the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure guideline to rate every roadway in terms of its the visual condition assessment. We try to look also at the structural adequacy of the roadways in terms of as-built drawings, but there was limited as-built drawings available on the structures of the roadways itself. So we had to go along with the visual condition assessment. So the condition assessment that we showed you was pretty much done in accordance with the MOTI guidance, but it is a visual condition assessment based on defects like ponding and cracking and alligator cracking and all the criteria that gets looked at in rating the pavement condition index.
Okay, so it's surface. Okay, that's all that's my question.
Thank you, Councillor Caputo. Any other, Councillor Zagorda?
Comment on, on the positive too, and looking at the last slide, when we look at the Canadian average in the city of Sault Ste. Marie, we're substantially much higher than the Canadian average. And I think that's compliments to city staff and what we've been doing in this city and hope to continue that. So I think, roads is something that we definitely need to look at, but looking at the positive, there's a lot of good things that are happening. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zagorda. All right, seeing no other questions on this matter, is there a vote to accept
There
this
is a
as
motion.
information?
Is under 8.4.1. It's a motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Gardy, resolved that the report of the Manager of Development and Environmental Engineering dated January 9, 2023 concerning asset management plan core assets be received as information, and it has been cast to vote.
Council, all in favor? Motion carries. Council, that brings us to the consent agenda, but I do see that we've got Mr. Lukenda and Mr. Sarlo here from the Greyhounds. So if we could start with agenda item 7.10, Soo Greyhounds 2024 Memorial Cup bid. That will allow our guests the opportunity to answer any questions anyone has and receive any information from them that they wish to share with us. If they do wish to share any information with us, I'd encourage you to come up, Mr. Lukenda, and then we can have them on their way. Unless, of course, you want to stay for the rest of the council meeting, you're more than welcome to. Welcome to council, Mr. Lukenda and Mr. Sarlo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council, staff. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you tonight. You do have a very thorough report from Mr. Vare about the topic this evening with respect to our efforts to try to land the 2024 Memorial Cup for Sault Ste. Marie. This is a very exciting opportunity for our community. We have we feel that we have a strong bid to put forward to achieve the Memorial Cup in the Soo, but we do have formidable competition. We are competing against 3 other communities, excuse me, 3 other communities this time around for the Memorial Cup. The bids are due at the end of this month. Decisions are made in March of this year for the following May, for May of 2024. This is a really prestigious event that happens once every year. It is the national championship of the Canadian Hockey League, and it generally moves from Ontario to the east to the west. And this will be Ontario's turn to host the Memorial Cup in 2024. So we're excited about the opportunity to really put forward our best, put our best foot forward in really what our community has to offer for an event of this scale. Historically, this was the kind of event that was generally favored towards larger communities for a lot of reasons. But more recently, I think the Canadian Hockey League has realized the merits of considering other communities and communities such as ours that are so vested in their local team. And as you know, we have the best fans in major junior hockey for the Soo Greyhounds. And this is an opportunity really for us to give back to our community and to host an event that really draws not only hockey fans, but people from across the country and across the world to take in not only the hockey event, it's an 8-day tournament amongst 4 teams, but really it's much more than that. It's really a festival, and it's a whole community-wide festival. And as you could see in the report, we're planning a number of community events to really make it a large-scale festival-type atmosphere that our whole community can be involved in and be part of. And we think it'll be a great opportunity to showcase our wonderful city and all the things that we have going on. Frank Sarlo, for those, I think you all probably know Frank, has been very involved in bringing community events to the city, and he has graciously offered to co-chair this effort with me. We will have a large organizing committee of over 15 different committees involved in this process, and over 500 volunteers that will be needed to execute an effort like this. So it really is a community-wide effort. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about support for an effort of this nature. And I think, as you can see in the report, the payback from a tourism standpoint, from an economic development standpoint, is really quite significant. In Halifax, the report that's attached to yours, being one of the more recent ones, it shows over $15 million of economic activity generated by an event of this nature. It's a 10-day event. And as I say, the hockey is at the core of it, but it's much more than that in terms of the overall atmosphere that we're trying to create for this. So with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Lukenda. Councillor Hollingsworth, then Councillor Bezo-Allen.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Mr. Leon, this is wonderful. This is, I mean, we are a hockey town, right? I mean, what was it? Help me out. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we put up the sign in Ron Francis, and we have done such a great job to bring the community together and make sure that our young people are taught, you know, the proper hockey skills. So very exciting. I support this, but I just have two quick questions. Can you just elaborate on some other funding sources that you are going after to make sure that this is a successful event, please?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. This will require a lot of support and funding across a number of different areas. So we are, in addition to the city, we are working with the province on funding. We are working on corporate sponsorship packages, because there will be a broad-based corporate sponsorship both nationally and at the local level, with opportunities for businesses to get involved in an event of this nature. And then, of course, ticket sales. Ticket sales largely on a package basis for the whole event, but also on a game-by-game basis to make sure that we have a full building and that we have a source of funding through that mechanism and the concessions and other things that go along with the actual event. So there'll be a number of different sources of funding, and this is one of the key components.
Okay. And again, I support this because by us showing our funding, we send a very clear, loud message that we believe in this. So my other question, I know that you and Mr. Sarlo are very much community-minded, and thank you for that, for your years of your support for the community. And I know you're very charity-minded. Is there going to be a charity component attached to this so that we can help our local grassroots charities?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, I'm really glad you raised that. I neglected to mention that a part of the component, there's two aspects that I want to touch on. One is a legacy type project that each Memorial Cup tries to leave a legacy behind in the community of some nature. And we've been working on different ideas. One of those ideas may be a statue or monument that reflects inspiring the youth of tomorrow to be involved in the great game of hockey. And on the charitable side, there's a couple of means of generating some charitable funds from an event like this that we're hoping to be able to connect to. One is the 50-50 draws that will occur during each one of the Greyhound games, which can be quite significant for an event of this nature. With the Greyhound games, we support local youth hockey, both men's, boys and girls youth hockey. And that's been a wonderful source of funding for those ventures. In this event, we'd be looking to do something else. Currently, we're looking at addiction and mental health as a possible source of funding from the 50-50 draws, as well as we are hoping to do a Ken Danby art exhibit as part of the festival. And we're thinking that the proceeds from that might be another source of charitable donation. So these are still things that are in the formative stage, but we're certainly mindful of that and hope to be able to direct some funding towards an important cause like that.
I knew you'd have the answers. Again, both of you gentlemen are very good at supporting local charities. And again, I thank you for that. And I know that in the past, when we had bonspiels, sometimes we would give out tickets to those that are challenged economically. And I'm sure that you're probably considering that too. And with regards to the kids portion, I'm so excited that you're going to have an event focused towards kids, and maybe you can do a tug of war to create some competition and a charity event. So again, thank you very much for all your hard work, not just with this, but again, in past events, to you and Mr. Sorrow. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Vezo-Allen.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Lukenda. I certainly appreciate the amount of work that goes into doing a bid of this magnitude. So formal bid presentations are January 31st from the report. So I'm assuming that within that presentation, you need to have all of the funding sources that are confirmed. And does that then add to your points in terms of being the host city?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen. The submission is January 31st. They will then be setting a date for a follow-up with questions. There isn't actually a formal in-person presentation opportunity. So you submit your bid, they'll follow up with some questions, I assume by Zoom, and then the decisions in March. So what we're trying to do is firm up as many sources of funding as we can in advance of our formal submission. There are some that may still be a work in progress that we're going to make some educated assumptions on. And then we'll have to, as we work through the process, if we are selected, try to land that funding and make adjustments within our overall proposal to fit the amount of funding that we have. So we're trying to front end that as much as possible and be as predictable as we can with those amounts. But we know that some of the funding amounts won't yet be tied down by January 31st.
In terms of your overall budget, what is the overall budget for the event that you've drafted so far, and what are your expected revenues?
In total, the amount of funding needed to make sure that we can put on a world-class event, including all of the various activities in the community, is pushing $5 million. Okay. It's a number of different, because of the number of events we're trying to pull off. That's the order of magnitude.
Now, in terms of the funding from the province, is it the fund due to the fact that you're going to be having people stay in hotel rooms? Is it the marketing fund where you can pay for paid advertising? Is that what that one is to the province, the application that you have to the province?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen, we are talking to the province about a number of different sources. There's a sports hosting program, there's a tourism fund, there's a number of different things. So we don't want to limit or overly constrain the potential. So we're talking to them about what would be the best option or options for an event of this nature and scale.
Okay. And you do state in your letter that, Sault Ste. Marie is a long shot. And I was just looking at, so the Scotiabank Center in Halifax has an occupancy of 10,500. And they received 79,000 visitors. On top of that, they have 47 skyboxes when they ran the tournament. So just being real, not being sort of the firm realist here, in terms of your bid, what are you doing to compensate for the fact that we don't have seating for 10,000 and we don't have 47 skyboxes and specialty lounges and that sort of thing? So what are you doing to kind of make our bid stand out from, say a Halifax?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen, excellent question. We are competing in this situation with 3 other communities, as I mentioned. Kingston, whose arena is about the size of ours. Yep. Niagara, which is St. Catharines, their arena is a little bit larger than ours. Saginaw, Michigan, their arena is about 7,000, I believe. So there are other communities in our league in Ontario that are much bigger than ours, London, for example. But we're competing with ones that are relatively around the same size, maybe a little bit bigger. But to your fundamental point, what we're trying to do is distinguish our bid by emphasizing the small town benefits, if you will, the fact that the way I've characterized in the bid is that there are Memorial Cups that occur in a city. This would be a community-wide effort. This would be a community event. And I really believe the Sioux has risen to the occasion in a number of other major events and embraced the activity and the event in its entirety. And that's really what we're selling, that this would be something that would be a real, I believe we have attributes in our city, not only to offer things like waterfront opportunities and festivals and all of those types of things that I do believe set us apart from some of the other communities, but also that small town feel and the vibrancy and the passion that we have towards junior hockey in our community. So it's playing up all of the benefits. I don't believe the arena, we certainly have a great arena in our community that's well-sized for our community. And I don't believe it's a material detriment in the scheme of things.
Okay. And then in terms of all the events you've listed, everything from, the golf tournament to the kids zone, to the concert series and beer gardens, to the fun run, to the powwow, do you have partners in place in theory at least, and sort of not necessarily formalized, but at least confirmations that yes, we will contribute to this, and these are the organizations that you have confirmed partnerships with?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Venezuela, we've initiated those conversations in some cases 2 years ago when the Memorial Cup was canceled, but they weren't formalized. We've reinitiated them this time. We've started to have conversations with community partners that would be relevant to some of those different events that you mentioned. They're still in the discussion stages, formative stages, but there's been overwhelming support and enthusiasm for the idea of each of these events. And it's just a matter of pulling the pieces together.
Okay. Is part of that bid requirement that you do have confirmed letters of participation from your partners?
No, letters of support from those that we can, and we are putting together a package of letters of support related to our bid as an appendix, but not in terms of each of the events as checking off the box for all of these. We are at a conceptual stage. Once the winning bidder is chosen, the Canadian Hockey League and their events team works with the community to massage the events based on their experience and the community's attributes.
Okay. My last question is for Mr. Ver. Mr. Ver, in terms of this $300,000 contribution, do you have an aligned budget that goes with that? So we know what is getting used with that 300,000?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Venezuelan. The budget that we have, the 300,000 does come from the Community Development Fund. We haven't got to that stage yet. It really is contributing to the overall event and the expenses that the Greyhounds will incur as a result of the Memorial Cup.
So my follow-up question would be, and I'm hopeful that this will happen, but if we are not the successful community, then I'm assuming that this $300,000 then comes back into our coffers since the event isn't going to be taking place.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Venezuelan, that's correct. We won't be expending any of those funds until we find out that the bid is successful.
Okay. Well, Tim, best of luck, and Mr. Sarlo as well. And we wish you best of luck with your team, and I will support this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Venezuelan. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have comments. Should we wait until the other councillors have questions or just go ahead? Go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the report, Mr. Ver. Basically, my comments are just about how intertwined Sault Ste. Marie has become with hockey. When I was on the Sault Ste. Marie Museum Board, they were quite proud of a lot of the historical hockey pieces that they have there. There's a long storied history of hockey with Sault Ste. Marie, as we all know. An event like this would really showcase that. As a few of us councillors are Maple Leafs fans, it's not uncommon that you watch a game and they highlight Sault Ste. Marie. Obviously, because of right now, half the team is Greyhounds, and the GM is, of course, from Sault Ste. Marie. But something that you don't notice as well is way out in the West Coast, we have another Sault-ite that's a GM of an NHL team, and that's Ron Francis. So 2 out of the 32 teams in the NHL have a GM from Sault Ste. Marie, which is outstanding. We're the origin of the number 99, which is the only retired number throughout the entire NHL. Every hockey list that you read with the history of the best players, you're going to see the Espositos, you're going to see Ron Francis, all these players that came from Sault Ste. Marie. I think we are inherently a hockey town, and hosting something like the Memorial Cup would be a real boon for all of the tourism initiatives that we have, because we could really show that off on a national scale. If you watch these Memorial Cup games that get the national coverage every year, they're always showing off the community. They're showing off things and events. And I think it's something we can really take pride in. And like Mr. Lukenda said, it's a community event and we can really show ourselves off. I'm sure the tourism folks here are really ecstatic at the opportunity to show what we've been doing and to show what we offer. And I think that this is a fantastic opportunity, and obviously you have my support and hopefully you have the support of the rest of council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Dufour.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just have a quick question for Mr. Ver. In your report, Mr. Ver, last line, staff have discussed with the Sioux Greyhounds that facility fees could be covered either through concession sharing or a ticket surcharge. I was just wondering which facility fees are you referring to there? Is that the ones that the Greyhounds pay to us?
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour. The facility fees are really just the rental fees of the Memorial Gardens for the extent of the event.
Okay.
They'll also need practice time probably at the John Rhodes for the teams during the event. So those rental fees for the various facilities the city will be providing.
Okay, and so that would just mean that the event would be able to pay for part of it in a different way. Makes sense. Thanks very much. And thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Lukenda. I wish you all the.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Dufour. Councillor Gardy.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Lukenda, thanks for coming. I'm supportive. I'll get that out of the way right now. In these situations, when you're making a bid, it's, as you kind of referenced, it's important for us to kind of highlight what's different about us. I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity to work with Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, to highlight the international nature of our community and another hockey town, if you will. I just put that out there as potentially maybe getting letters of support from entities on the other side of the bridge, which I know you know well. So thanks very much.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, excellent point. We in fact have 6 teams throughout the CHL that are from the US, 2 in the Ontario Hockey League being Erie and Saginaw. There's a chance that one of those 2 could be in the Memorial Cup as well. Regardless, we think there's an opportunity with the number of hockey fans in Northern Michigan, Sault Ste. Marie specifically, to draw them over, not only for the hockey, obviously, but for the whole festival atmosphere. And we think that's something that does separate us from some of the other cities. And it's an opportunity for us to really promote our tourism and what our city has to offer.
Thank you, Councillor Gardy. Councillor Spina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Most of the questions I had have been asked. I do have a few comments I want to make, but one thing I do want to highlight in your presentation, thank you, Mr. Lukenda. I want to make sure it's very clear. There is no direct financial benefit to the team in this. This is a benefit to the community as a whole, not a benefit to the Sioux Greyhounds organization. So I think that's an important distinction we have to make here. And I really want to thank you for coming here, especially yourself and Mr. Sarlo for coming here. You know, I had the opportunity to read a passage in a very recently written book by Mr. Sarlo. Describes a very wonderful day in 1993 when the Greyhounds won the Memorial Cup. And as I was reading that passage, I could smell myself being in the arena. I could smell the popcorn. I could smell the ice, and I can feel the ice, and I could feel the cold of that old arena, the old Memorial Gardens. And 30 years later, I think it's time that the youth of our community had the chance to experience that again. And I can't thank you enough for standing up here and bringing that to our community and bringing that to our youth. So thank you for that. And of course, you do have my support here today as well.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Spina. Councillor Bruni.
Councillor Spina took my words. I just wanted to maybe give a little bit of history to the councillors and staff. If we are successful, it's 31 years later that the Memorial Cup comes back to the Sioux, which is well deserving. And if you listen to a lot of the sportscasters and the expertise, they want to have them in smaller arenas, which is probably better than going to an arena that has 18,000 fans and half the seats are empty. So it's great. And I do recall back in 1993, the city did do quite a bit of improvements to the Memorial Gardens at the time, paint, fresh facelift, and the added extra seats, etc. So I think it's a bonus for us. I'm totally in favor, obviously. It'll put a buzz in our city for 10, 12, 14 days. So it's exciting. Thank you and good luck.
Mr. Mayor, if I may address the comments by Mr. Spina, Councillor Spina and Bruni. I have to give credit to my colleague, Frank Sarlo, who was very much involved in that 1993 Memorial Cup bid 30 years ago. And at the time, he will tell you they had 6 weeks to prepare for the Memorial Cup. The process was different. And from when they found out to when they pulled it off, it was a 6-week effort. And it's still talked about in the league as one of the best Memorial Cups ever. And it's, it's something, it's a feeling we want to recapture. It's a whole new generation of hockey fans and citizens. And it's something that we really want to bring back for the benefit of the community as a whole.
Thank you, Mr. Lukenda. You've got certainly the support of council. You've got my support. One of the things you said, I think, stuck out, which was that this isn't an attempt for our city to host the Memorial Cup necessarily. This is an attempt for our city to be part of the Memorial Cup experience. So it's not the Memorial Cup in Sault Ste. Marie, it's Sault Ste. Marie's Memorial Cup.
Exactly.
And if it does happen, we're all hopeful it will happen. We look forward to the Greyhounds being in the finals as well. So no pressure there, but there is a vote on the agenda item, unless there are other councillors with questions, comments. Okay, well, seeing none, we'll take a vote on the request.
Do you want it separated from consent?
We may
then?
as well, yeah.
It's open for voting.
All in favor? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councillors and staff. We look forward to bringing this home. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, council, that brings us to the consent agenda. Are there questions on matters on the consent agenda? Councillor Bezo-Allen.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, on 7.3, probably to Ms. Fields. Ms. Fields, when I was going through the document requirements that go to the assessment review board for the reduction in the taxation, there's a lot of really highly confidential documents, tax returns, disability documents, medical documents. In terms of city staff processing this for the tribunal, what are going to be the safeguards for all of this really highly confidential information?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bezo-Allen, it wouldn't be my department that would be dealing with this. It would be the tax department. That said, if it were a legal department, I mean, we have certain confidentiality agreements and things in place that I don't know whether tax department would have that same process.
So it'd be through Lisa. Yes. Sorry.
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bezo-Allen, actually, my report, the intention is to delegate the authority to the ARB to actually process these appeals for one of the reasons that you clearly stated.
So if someone came to the tax counter, because just knowing a lot about the disability community and people living in poverty, they don't necessarily have access to scanning and emailing or sending it off. Will there be someone at the office to be able to assist so that they can submit it to the ARB? Because I can see where there's going to be some confusion in terms of, where do I go to submit? I'm just going to bring all the paperwork down to the tax office. And I can definitely guarantee that there's going to be those circumstances. So do you have sort of a plan in place for people that come up to the counter to apply?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bezo-Allen, the ARB does accept paper copies through email. If someone preferred to do, we would definitely, the tax department would help scan forward all their paperwork to the ARB on their behalf. But they are very accessibly aware. So they do have those processes in place for all scenarios. But if anybody ever came to the counter, we would definitely help them get through the process.
Okay, that's all the questions I have.
Okay,
thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bezo-Allen. Anybody else on 7.3? Councillor Venezuela, any other questions on matters on the consent? Okay, thank you. Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Laming, 7.6 Circle driving test property. I guess it would be a Strathclair. Just a quick question. Will they have to have insurance before they proceed?
You, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, yes, the business of Surco Drive Test will be covered fully for insurance for their time while providing the lessons.
Okay, and how safety will it be, especially during the weekdays from 8 to 4? Are any of the fields used?
Through
during the
Mr.
week?
Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, that time was chosen because there's very little use during the day. If there's going to be a tournament or any special event or festival there, we'll be allowed to have special notice, provide that to Drive Test, and they'll vacate on those days.
Okay, thank you.
Those are all your questions, Councillor Bruni?
Also has a question on it?
Is this on 7.6 or one? Do you have
No,
any
no,
others?
no, I have
Okay.
others.
Anyone else on 7.6? Councillor Caputo?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Laming. So when Drive Test is not using that property, it is still going to be used as parking for the fields?
You, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Crystal, that is correct.
Oh, amazing. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else on 7.6? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Bruni, you had other items?
Yes, agenda 7.5 municipal election 2022 summary initiatives. First of all, I want to say that the coverage of this past election has been excellent by using social media, by using any way of getting the word out there regarding the election. I guess my question goes to our city clerk, Rachel. Rachel, there was concerns throughout, well, the voting day, especially when, and I'll give you a couple of examples. People living, say on Batanti, Diane, Farewell, Kingsford, etc. They would have to go approximately 2 kilometers away to go and cast their vote, when just around the corner from their area, there was another polling station. And I'll give you another example. Residents living on Doncaster, they could have walked across the street and voted at Lady Lourdes, but instead they would have to go to Believers Bible Chapel, which is down the road on Henry Street. And my last example, coming from my counterpart there, Councillor Kinnick, stated on John Street, they would have 3 polling stations. So people would be spread out and they will. So my question is, can't we get it, like, for instance, if you're half a kilometer away, why not go to the closest polling station and not the furthest?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni. I'm happy to show you the mapping that we have that has various voting locations and the voting subdivisions as we assign them. It is, for one thing, it's been difficult to get locations. What we have tried to do is even out the number of voters that will be attending at each location, so we don't have overstressing in some areas. And it does become difficult to draw the line sometimes as to whether you're going to go east or west, north or south, to try to even that out. I'm happy to show you the voting subdivisions and how we connect them. We recognize that there are some that we can make half of that, the voters going to that voting location, happen, and the other half not so much. But it certainly is a challenge to find the locations. I think in 2026, we may consider some super stations at city facilities. And in 2022, we did use the GFL to try that out as a larger venue that we could, we didn't have a whole lot of electors going there because we wanted to assess it in terms of accessibility and so on. But I think in 2026, we may be able to use some more municipal facilities to have larger areas. So there may be more travel time, but more focused areas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone else on 7.5? Councillor Caputo, Councillor Segurdo?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Rachel, in regards to a super center, is there any way that we would be able to allow voters to say anyone can use the Memorial Gardens or a certain area? Like, this is your polling station, but if you can't get there, Station Mall or whatever it is.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Caputo, we, some of our comparable municipalities do that as a vote anywhere. We thought about it in 2022. Our concern was that then our election workers would have to have all ballots for all 5 wards, plus the school board wards, plus the school board that are at large. And we thought, as much as it would be great if it could just spit out what your ballot was, and then you can go and cast it, and having a human being try to figure from that whole array of potential ballots. That's the only reason that we held back on that.
So with the tabulator, that was only to tabulate the actual ballot. You still had to have the physical piece of paper. Is there any way, like, have we looked into potentially like having sort of a digital map to be able to allow people to vote from anywhere? Like, you know, you pull up, you're like, here's my ID, and then your screen comes up as your ward.
So yeah, so sort of a hybrid online sort of, is that
Kind of, but in
that what,
person. I mean, I don't even know if it's possible. I just think that convenience is going to be the, you know, the best way to get more people out. So that's often, and like getting friends together, you know, and that's not always the easiest thing to do when everyone has different polling stations. My other question is, I had a lot of people say that they never received their voting cards. So it was a deterrent. Like, I think people, those voting cards, I know you don't necessarily need them to vote, but I think it reminds everyone to vote. And a lot of people thought maybe they weren't eligible if they weren't. Sorry, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Caputo, the voter notification cards were, as I noted in the report, a significant challenge. And the genesis of that is the quality of the voters list, because it's the data in the voters list that generates the voter notification cards. And it was extremely frustrating to have eligible voters who didn't receive them, and you're right, who then wondered if they would be eligible to vote at all. And on the other side, a significant problem was people who would get multiple voter notification cards because their name would be Andrew Smith, Andy Smith, A.S. Smith. So it's a significant challenge. And we're hoping with Elections Ontario taking over administration of the voters list, that is their line of business, as is not MPAC's line of business. We're hoping that the quality of that list can be better, which would be hugely beneficial to the whole process.
Okay. So just to close out, I just want to say, I thought that city staff did a really wonderful job. I know I had a few questions there, but this was the most that I had seen. You know, I guess because I was involved, I was watching too, but to me, it was all over social media. I think city staff did a really great job, and I look forward to helping in any way that I can in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Caputo. Councillor Zagordo?
Before my question, just again, I'd like to echo Councillor Caputo and Councillor Bruni's comments on staff and the communication that happened in the community. And unfortunately, we still, need to work on that voter turnout. There's no doubt about that. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to our city clerk, has there been any consideration in voting online or by phone? And the reason why I mention that is I've heard of some communities who receive an access code on their voter cards to be able to go online or even use their phone to vote. Has there been any consideration on that to try to increase voter turnout?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Zagordo, there are several communities in the province who do use internet voting. It's a bit of a surprise that there are not established online voting standards. And our recommendation when we discussed with council early on in the process what alternative voting methods we might pursue was not to pursue online voting until such time as there are approved standards for security. And that is something we're excited about, that we're part of the academic project that's evaluating various alternative voting methods, that Sault Ste. Marie is going to be participating in that. The other problem, further to what Councillor Caputo was asking about within voter notification cards, until we know how robust our voters list is, we're really not comfortable recommending online voting, because while you may get multiple cards at your home, you're unlikely to then bring multiple cards to a voting place to request a ballot. When it's online voting and there's an independent pin there, the temptation for voter fraud, I think, is greater. And that's our concern about online voting until both those standards are established and until we know that we have a really robust voters list.
Just in follow-up, the reason why I bring that up is that in discussing the online voting or internet voting, some individuals mentioned that, you know, if it wasn't for that, they wouldn't vote at all, which again is a sad, you know, state in terms of voter turnout. We're trying to get as many people out as we can. But thank you for the information. That's great.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Zagordo, it is a bit shocking, the communities even that have exclusively internet voting, and they still get the low voter turnout.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zagordo. Councillor Kinnick.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Rachel. I just wanted to comment on voting day. I visited all 11 polling stations that were set up in Ward 4, and the staff were really good. Everything looked really good. If people were happy, there was people in every place that I went. The biggest issue I encountered on voting day was a constituent called me, and she had property in Ward 4 and Ward 5, and she went to a polling station that was for Ward 4 and Ward 5, which was Greenfield School. And they gave her, I guess the voting card she had was for her Ward 5 property, but that is not her main residence. And they gave her a Ward 5 voting card. So she was a little bit upset about that because she wasn't able to cast ballots for the councillors in her ward. So that was the only issue I really encountered. Everything else was really well done. I was at the end of the night, I gathered some friends and family. We went to 7 of the polling stations for the printout of the votes, and that was really interesting to do. And I had a really good time that day, and it was fun. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kinnick. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Through Mayor, it's just a comment, if I may. Basically, from my particular ward, there's a lot of positivity about how many different ways that you can vote, especially for those that couldn't get out of their house. And as we know in our community, we have people that are bedridden. We have seniors that are struggling to get out. And we have caregivers, adults that take time from their own jobs to be with their parents to make sure that they're taken care of. So I cannot tell you how much they appreciated that we had the team that was able to go right to their house and how that person casts a ballot. And this was geared towards all ages. It wasn't just seniors. So yes, there are some areas that we want to improve in as technology improves and as privacy improves. I just want to say, give you kudos that we did have this. And I know that in Ward 1, many people use this service. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Anyone else on 7.5? Councillor Gardy.
Yeah, I'm just going to comment real quickly. Things I thought went well. You know, staff did a good job in terms of spreading the word via social media and by other means. But, you know, when it comes to elections, we can count on city staff to do as much as they want. But elections are only as good as the candidates who run in them. So it's incumbent upon anybody who's running for office to do their best to campaign as hard as they can and interface with as many people to give them the reason to vote. So that coupled with the efforts of city staff should eventually get us to a bit of a better place. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Gardy. Anyone else on 7.5? Seeing none. Okay, Councillor Bruni, did you have anything else on the consent agenda? Anyone else with any other matter on the consent agenda? Councillor Kinnick.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to, I believe it is to Mr. Lamming.
What agenda item, Councillor Kinnick?
7.8, the transit pass.
Okay.
I'd just like to make a comment that I think that's a great initiative. I remember when I was in a high school co-op program that we were also given the bus pass to help us get back and forth from our placement. And I think that's a really great program to have high school kids on the bus, get used to using the bus and get them into the system. And I know that before, and this is a piece of information that I learned while I was campaigning as well, Luke brought it up in a previous meeting, was that every time somebody rides the bus, the city gets a payment from the federal carbon tax. So the more people we can get on the bus, the better. So
thank you, Councillor Kinnick. Anyone else on 7.8? No? 7.8?
7.8.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Lamming. It's a great program. I think this is very beneficial for our youth. And I'm just wondering, has there been any attempts been made to extend the program to the Huron-Spirit Catholic District School Board and our 2 French boards?
You, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Zagoro, yes, we've had discussions with the Catholic School Board. We look to continue those discussions to hopefully introduce it there, and we will also reach out to the 2 French school boards as well to hopefully provide the same offering so that we can increase usage for our youth in the community.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. 7.8, anybody else? Going once, going twice? Okay. Seeing none. Councillor Kinnick, did you have anything else on consent? No? Councillor Dufour?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just 7.14, really quickly. Mr. Chinazo, really through you, Mr. Mayor. So I really appreciate the thorough report, 13 pages. I'm especially happy that you included timelines for when council can get updates on all of the, well, for some of us, tantalizing details on what you might be bringing forward in light of this. And so just thank you very much, and looking forward to those updates.
Thank you, Councillor Dufour. Anyone else on 7.14? All right, seeing none. Councillor Dufour, any other items on consent? Okay, any other councillors with any other items on consent? Councillor Spina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 7.12 from Ms. Fields.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your report back. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate that there's more information coming and there's a lot of work being done there. So thank you for that. Question I have, the one indication that you made in here, you made an indication that you wish to continue with the section of the bylaw that closes bicycle lanes from November 1st to April 30th. Should remain for liability purposes since the city doesn't currently maintain them. Question is, does our liability really change? Whether we maintain them in the winter or not, do we not own, as the owners of the land, do we not own liability anyway, no matter what?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Spina, if we say that we're opening the bike lanes and we allow people to understand that we're going to keep those clear enough for them to cycle on, and then somebody takes snow from their driveway and pushes it into the road, and we don't get there to clear because possibly our plow truck just had gone through there, and somebody has an accident in the bike lane because the bike lane is open, we open ourselves up to liability.
Okay, no, but my question is just, does that change if we say it's closed? I mean, if we say it's closed and we do nothing to actually close it, is our liability still not there? If we're saying it's closed, is it now incumbent upon us to take action to actually physically close those lanes, or no? Or are we just saying it's not maintained?
That's correct. So once
okay.
that date comes into play, we're saying we're not maintaining them
Okay.
for bicycle purposes. We're maintaining our roads, but we're not maintaining them to the minimum maintenance standard for a bike lane.
Okay, and I understand. I mean, there's no way we can ever get rid of liability completely. I wish we could, but we can't. So we're doing our best to basically mitigate any potential risk there. Okay.
At this point, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spina. Anyone else on 7.12? All right, seeing none. Councillor Spina, any other agenda items?
Thank you.
Anyone else with any other items on the consent agenda? All right.
So I have a motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Gardy, resolve that all items listed under date January 9, 2023, agenda item 7 consent agenda, save and accept agenda item 7.10 be approved as recommended.
All in favor? Motion carries.
And 7.10 has already been voted on. So that will take us to
8.8.
which is board and committee appointments. So what we've done is taken all of the boards and committees that we had sufficient councillor interest in, and we have placed them on a consent motion and separated out the 3 that will need a simultaneous recorded vote to determine which council members will sit on them. So just going to move to 8.8. I have a motion by Councillor Spina and Scott, resolve that all items under agenda items 8.8.1, 8.8.2, 8.8.3, and 8.8.4 board and committee appointments be approved as recommended.
All in favor? Motion carries.
And so then we'll go to the first requiring a simultaneous recorded vote is with respect to the downtown business improvement area. That is the Downtown Association. And that is 8.8.5.1. There is 1 member of city council required for that board, and councillors Caputo and Kinnock have both indicated interest in serving on this board. So as we did with the simultaneous recorded vote last meeting, you will each mark 1 of either councillors Caputo or Kinnock and write your name on the ballot. The deputy clerk will collect them and I will read them off, and the CAO will tabulate to see when we get to 6.
Council, just be sure to write your own name on there as well, so we're clear who's voting.
You should have 10. Thank you. Councillor Bruni votes for Councillor Kinnock. Councillor Vezoellen, Councillor Kinnock. Councillor Gardy for Councillor Kinnock. Councillor Dufour for Councillor Kinnock. Councillor Scott for Councillor Caputo. Councillor Caputo for Councillor Caputo. Councillor Spina for Councillor Caputo. Councillor Zagordo for Councillor Caputo. Councillor Hollingsworth for Councillor Caputo. Councillor Kinnock for Councillor Kinnock. And Mayor Shoemaker for Councillor Caputo.
The vote is 6-5 for Councillor Caputo.
So I will just. This is a motion by Councillors Spina and Scott, resolved that Councillor A. Caputo be appointed to the Downtown Business Improvement Area Board from January 9, 2023 to December 31, 2026. And I'm opening that for the vote.
Okay, council, all in favor? Motion carries.
And next we have the Environmental Sustainability Committee. And again, it's one member of City Council, and we have had Councillor Gardy and Councillor Kinnock both indicating an interest in serving on this committee. So if you would indicate one of either Councillors Gardy or Kinnock on your paper and write your name as well, we'll do the same process. We got 10. Councillor Hollingsworth votes for Councillor Gardy. Councillor Gardy votes for Councillor Gardy. Councillor Bezo-Allen for Councillor Gardy. Councillor Kinnock for Councillor Kinnock. Councillor Zagordo for Councillor Gardy. Councillor Caputo for Councillor Gardy. Councillor Spina for Councillor Gardy. Councillor Scott for Councillor Gardy. Councillor Dufour for Councillor Gardy. Councillor Bruni for Councillor Kinnock. And Mayor Shoemaker for Councillor Gardy.
Results are Councillor Gardy 9 votes, Councillor Connect 2 votes.
I will open the vote. It is a motion by Councillors Spina and Scott. Resolved that Councillor Gardy and citizens Mark Britton, Eric Emelson, Donna Hilsinger, Andrew Judge, Tobin Kern, Victoria Prouse, Andre Riopel, and Nairi Rubel be appointed to the Environmental Sustainability Committee from January 9, 2023 to December 31, 2026.
All in favor, council? Motion carries.
And Police Services Board. So we need an additional, I need 2 members of council, given that the mayor is not taking a seat on the Police Services Board, and Councillors Bruni, Caputo, and Bezo-Allen have indicated interest in serving on the board. So in this case, same process, but you'll vote for 2 members of Bruni, Caputo, and Bezo-Allen.
While everyone's voting, council, I'd just like to draw the community's attention to the great community member, Ava Debach, who will be appointed, presuming this vote carries, to the Police Service Board this evening. An excellent resume, and we look forward to her being an excellent appointee to the board. So presuming this carries, congratulations to Ms. Debach for her appointment.
Councillor Dufour votes for Councillor Bezo-Allen and Councillor Caputo. Councillor Hollingsworth votes for Councillor Bruni and Councillor Bezo-Allen. Councillor Kinnock for Councillor Bruni and Councillor Bezo-Allen. Councillor Spina for Councillors Bruni and Bezo-Allen. Councillor Scott for Councillors Bruni and Bezo-Allen. Councillor Caputo for Councillor Caputo and Bezo-Allen. Councillor Zagordo for Councillors Caputo and Bruni. Councillor Bezo-Allen for Councillors Caputo and Bezo-Allen. Councillor Gardy for Councillors Vezoallen and Caputo. Councillor Bruni for Councillors Bruni and Vezoallen. Mayor Shoemaker for Councillors Vezoallen and Bruni.
We're just doing some calculus.
The results of this vote are Councillor Vezoallen with 10 votes, Councillor Bruni with 7 votes, and Councillor Caputo with 5 votes.
So that will be Councillors Bruni and Vezoallen. I'm just going to fill it in here. How do I pronounce her name? Ava Dibch. It's a motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Scott. Resolved that Councillors Bruni and Vezoallen and citizen Ava Dibch be appointed to the Police Services Board from January 9, 2023 to December 31, 2024.
All in favor? Motion carries.
And that will bring us to agenda item 9.1, which is a motion by Councillors Gardy and Scott. Whereas North American bird populations are declining at alarming rates, having dropped by more than 25% in the last 50 years. And whereas Nature Canada has developed a certification standard to certify eligible cities as a bird-friendly city to recognize and celebrate the contributions they have made to save bird lives in their municipalities. And whereas the goal of certification is to provide communities with a clear standard that reflects what a city needs to do to make it safe for birds. And whereas the city of Sault Ste. Marie and its surrounding area is home to many different species of birds, including several migratory bird species. And whereas there are many individuals and groups who already admire and monitor birds, as well as being engaged in efforts to protect birds. Now therefore be it resolved that city staff be requested to explore the bird-friendly city certification program to learn more about the criteria involved to join the program and report back to council on working with community partners to attain a bird-friendly city designation through Nature Canada.
Councillor Gardy, this is your motion. You have any comment or?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I came upon this, read a bit about it, and it was kind of coincided with the recent COP meeting in Montreal that focused on biodiversity. And I thought whatever any community can do to maintain and protect biodiversity in its region, we should pursue. So this is specifically for birds, as the motion states. We're home to many birds species, including migratory birds. So I thought it was something that city council could explore, and that's what or city staff could explore, and that's what I'm asking for through this motion. Ron Prickett, the president of the Sault Ste. Marie Naturalists of Michigan and Ontario, he's the president and works to maintain a bird-friendly environment on both sides of the border, reached out to you and I, Mr. Mayor, by way of email, and said his group is very supportive of the certification program and would be willing to work with city staff to support them however they could, should the certification be sought. So I ask for city council's support for city staff to simply explore this and to see if it's something viable for Sault Ste. Marie. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Gardy. Councillor Scott is the seconder. Did you have any comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Based on some community feedback, there's a couple things I just want to address. I do want to start out by saying I don't hate cats. I know there was an article out there about cats. I didn't like the movie adaptation of the musical, but other than that, I'm okay with cats. Some people have mentioned that they're concerned with, this all ties back to the cats, with rat issues, but in fact, birds are better at getting rid of rats than cats are. So I think protecting different types of birds are important. Birds do pollination, quite a bit of it. They spread seeds. There's a lot of important aspects for birds. Some of them are delicious. There's reasons why we want to protect our birds. And I just wanted to make sure that I point those out because I think there's a lot of misinformation floating around about what the intent behind this motion was. And I wanted to make sure that we address the importance of that aspect rather than getting rid of cats. So when Councillor Gardy brought it forward, I was happy to second it for him. So that was everything I wanted to address.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Anyone else with question? Okay, Councillor Hollingsworth.
I just have a comment. I just want to say I'm glad to see this tonight. And the reason is because about, I guess, a month ago on CBC radio, there was a program from a specialist saying the bird population in Canada is unfortunately seems to be declining based on their research. So having said that, perhaps if this is a success for us, we could be adding to the positive side. And if all fairness, I think it's fair to say that we have seen some birds coming back to our area, such as the sandhill crane. We've been seeing it more and more over the last few years. And I remember when I was younger, we didn't see it. So that's an example of a positive. So thank you, both of you, for bringing it to us.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Anyone else comment or question on this motion? All right, seeing none, we will have a vote on it. All in favor? Motion carries.
That takes us to agenda item 9.2, solar powered bus shelters. It's a motion by Councillors Knecht and Gardy, whereas the city of Sault Ste. Marie strives to be an environmental leader and through its strategic plan is committed to using resources wisely in an effort to maintain and create a sustainable city for future generations. And whereas many cities in Canada, including Edmonton, Gatineau, Moncton, London, Sarnia, Windsor, and Vancouver, have adopted a policy of implementing solar-powered bus shelters rather than the conventional structure, with widespread acceptance and appreciation from an environmental and financial perspective. Now, therefore, be it resolved that council requests Sault Transit staff to report on the feasibility of implementing solar-powered bus shelters as the preferred option for both new and replacement structures.
This is a motion, Council, as most of you are aware, that was brought to me by former Mayor Butland. And he has been a strident advocate for environmentalism throughout his time as mayor and on council. He spearheaded efforts to make our city or label our city as the alternative energy capital of North America. And he is obviously still passionate about environmental issues. He spearheaded our Green Committee and Green Days that were, or perhaps still are, hosted by the Civic Center. And we're happy to still have him involved, if not around the council table, at least in public life in some way, shape, or form. So I'll pass the floor over to Councillors Kinnick or Gardy if they have any further comment on this motion. Councillor Kinnick? Councillor Gardy? Councillor Kinnick, anything on this?
So I just want to make a comment on, yes, this is the way of the future. No, environmental sustainability is not only going green, but integrating green into the grid. So where we now have solar powered bus shelters, then we can provide lights inside the bus shelter for safety reasons. And also any power generated from the bus shelter can go back into the grid. And that's less that we have to use burn carbon or from other sources that are more damaging to the environment. So this is a great resolution, and I hope we get it, that staff comes back and it is feasible and we can implement it in our city.
Thank you, Councillor Kinnick. Councillor Gardy?
Other than just thanking Mayor Butland for essentially crafting this. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, votes open for voting. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. He'll be happy to hear.
And under agenda item 9.3, it's a motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Spina, whereas election signs educate or promote candidates in municipal, provincial, and federal elections, including school board trustees. And whereas a number of candidates use other means such as social media, media partners, and so forth to advertise themselves and their platforms. And whereas the city of Sault Ste. Marie has a bylaw that states where election signs can be placed, rules on removal, however, it fails to outline a limit on the number that can be posted within the community. Now therefore be it resolved that staff be requested to review other municipal bylaws specifically to limiting the number of signs used and the imposition of election sign permits and report back with a recommendation regarding a new election sign bylaw for municipal, provincial, and federal elections, including school board and or other types of elections.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you to all those constituents that have emailed many of us about the election signs. Honestly, the emails I've received, they were all very positive. In fact, many people had excellent ideas on how to maybe improve this. I just want to emphasize that we are not asking to eliminate all signs. That is definitely not our focus. That would be incorrect, that would be wrong. Election signs definitely serves a purpose. And the other piece of bringing it up tonight is that it was a perfect tie-in with the city clerk's report on the election. And yes, election signs definitely serve its purpose. It's a wonderful way to promote a particular candidate. However, we also have talked about tonight that campaigns are done differently today. We have social media as one example. We have Twitter and other forms of promoting candidates. So as I dove into thinking about this, I did my research and looked at other municipalities and to understand what they are doing around election signs. And I feel that we are still missing some key pieces in our bylaw that I'm very interested in having staff go and look at other best practices. And those best practices can be, as some constituents have outlined to me and others, more environmentally friendly election signs. We as a community have basically said no to plastic bags. Maybe there's a potential to look at more environmentally friendly election signs as one example. Another example is to look at when they're placed, how long they should be placed, and potentially other municipalities, I'm not saying we have to, but other municipalities do ask for a permit. And I'm looking at all election signs, not just municipal, but provincial, federal, potentially. So our team here at City Hall is excellent at looking at best practices. And I know that when this comes back, no rush, because obviously elections still some time away. However, provincial or federal is more closer. I really look forward to seeing best practices. And that's it. Thank you.
Council, any other comment or question on this? Yeah, Councilor Gardy, yeah.
I don't have a say, but if I did, I would eliminate election signs on all public property and I would leave them to private property. I think, though I'm as guilty as anybody is using them, I think they're kind of Rachel will attest to that. I think they're pretty much like kind of visual sort of pollution. So I think if people were interested in having them on private property, obviously we couldn't do anything about that. And I think it's a good way of showing support for the candidates they support. But I think it would be great if they weren't on any of our public boulevards or streets. Thanks.
Thanks, Councilor Gardy. Anyone else? Councilor Caputo?
Yeah, thank you. As the only candidate who I think has ever won a Sault Ste. Marie City election without the use of lawn signs, I definitely support the reduction. A lot of the reason why I chose in my campaign not to use the sign is because I am a person who I think it junks up our city. I'll be honest. I don't love seeing them flying into the water. I don't like seeing them, all the plastic and all the things. The other thing I think that the public should be aware of, these lawn signs, they're about $6 a piece for those little ones. So we are in a place right now where we're looking to be elected to sit around this table to discuss where we can find money to help people, with homelessness and things like that. And I think we've missed the mark a little bit in discussing that the use of lawn signs, in my opinion, is also, we're encouraging like a really classist it's very classist to assume that someone has up to 7,000, or I don't even know what the number is, but I think it's 7,000 to run in this election. I think we will see a different quality and caliber of candidate if we open it up to something where it is definitely more accessible. I probably spent, I won't say I spent the least, but I probably did spend the least, considering that I didn't have the signs. So yeah, in a city where we're battling homelessness and addiction and things like that, I would definitely love to see this money be put somewhere else. So thank you for bringing this motion forward.
Council, anyone else with question or comment on this? Councillor Kinnick?
So just earlier in the meeting, we had a discussion about engaging people to vote in the city elections. I think if you remove the signs, we're going to see a bigger drop because people won't even know there's an election going on. Most of the people that are voting nowadays are seniors, and those aren't people on social media and or the internet and Facebook or Instagram, where we're talking about eliminating signs. You're going to isolate probably the biggest population that votes right now. And I don't think that eliminating the signs is the solution. I do like Councillor Gardy's comment about private property. With myself, I was only able to print 100 signs with my budget, and I was able to collect 85 of them back. The ones I did lose were the ones on public property that were damaged or blew away in the wind. Usually if it's on somebody's property, they take a little bit better care of it. If they see it's fallen over, they pick it up, they fix it. So strategies like that, I think, are better instead of just blankets, no signs in our city.
Thank you, Councillor Kinnick. I think Councillor Hollingsworth had said, sorry, that she wouldn't support a total ban, but she did want some limitation on them. For what it's worth, I'll provide you guys my thoughts on this. I do think that any limit on election signs inherently advantage incumbents. So I don't support it for that reason. I think that election signs are one of the ways new candidates can break through, and they've got other ways as well, as you know, social media, traditional campaigning like door knocking and flyers. But we want people to be able to campaign within the, within the parameters of the law, but to whatever way they feel will best get their name out there for whatever council seat or mayoral seat that they're seeking. I don't think we should be limiting that. I think we should do the bare minimum to limit that, because anything we do could deter someone from running, could impede someone's ability to break through in an election. So I don't support this for that reason. I think the limits that are on there now, which are that they can't go up until Labor Day, and they have to, they can't impede lines of sight for driving, are the minimum restriction I do support imposing on them, and wouldn't want to further restrict anyone else's ability to break through in an election. So for that reason, I won't support this. And Councillor Bruni, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I totally agree with you, but I just have a question to Rachel. Rachel, what is the time limit after the election day? A candidate, how long do they have to take the signs down?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, and this only applies to municipal election signs, but they're to be removed within 72 hours after completion of voting.
So that's probably one of my issues, is there was a lot of signs out there past the 72-hour mark. Who monitors that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, we contact it when people contact us to make us aware. We will contact the candidates and ask them to remove. Public Works also helps us by picking them up if they've been left.
Do we need anything like a bylaw stating that if they're not picked up in 72 hours, city staff will pick them up, but they will charge you for the work that's entitled?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, I suppose that's something we would address in this information report as various options.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Spina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to, I think to Ms. Trzynski, just to build on what Councillor Bruni said, is there anything in the current bylaw that actually allows the city any teeth to actually enforce that rule, that 72-hour rule? Or is it just a rule with no enforcement mechanism?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Spina, there isn't a penalty provision, but generally what we do is if we see them, our public works staff will pick them up and bring them in, but we don't actively go out looking for them.
And again, that's at our expense, out of the city's expense. I
Exactly.
guess. Okay. And I like what Councillor Bruni was saying about, adding that expense to the person who, forgot to pick them up or neglected to pick them up. And I'm excited to see what you bring back as recommendations for that. So thank you.
Okay, council. Vote's open, but we'll take a manual vote as well. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion carries.
Carries 9-2. And agenda item 9.4 is a motion by Councillors Caputo and Bezo-Allen, whereas Sault Ste. Marie City Council proudly embraces our diverse population, including our budding drag community, and whereas literacy is encouraged from a young age and libraries are a place of learning and expanding one's mind. And whereas teaching diversity and inclusivity is encouraged from a young age, and whereas the Sault Ste. Marie Public Library is hosting a drag story time on January 14 at 11 a.m. Now therefore be it resolved that council support drag story time hosted by Sault Ste. Marie Public Library and encourages the community to attend and participate in this event.
All right, Councillor Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank city staff for getting this onto the agenda and the rush that they did. This is something that's really important to me because I think it just unifies people to be able to do what you want. My daughter and I will be in attendance at the library, and she will happily have a story read to her by a drag queen or king. And we support that community so much because in their acceptance, they're also teaching me how to accept, further things. And I just look at hate mongering and things that I'll use the word fester. I think it starts out with 2 protesters or 2 haters, and then the next year it grows to 4 and 6 and 8 and so on and so forth. This motion is really put forward to hopefully grow love throughout the community and acceptance. So thank you to Sue Pride and to the library for putting this forward. And I hope I can have everyone's support on this. Thank you.
Councillor Bezo-Allen.
Thank you. The first drag show story time was in San Francisco in 2015 by Michelle T, with the intent of embracing literacy and diversity. Everyone knows that I'm really about diversity and inclusion and understanding differences. And I think the fact that the library was very supportive of drag show story time, as well as if we don't have exposure to differing cultures, personalities, family models, all of those things, I think it's really important for us as a community. And I think it's a really wonderful thing. If my kids were younger, I'd be going as well. But at 18 and 20, I don't think they want to go. But I think this is just testament to what we can achieve as a community. And we do have a budding drag community, which I think is really wonderful. And drag performers are absolutely amazing. So I certainly encourage any of you, if you can go see one of their performances, to do that. And we're all just families and people, and libraries are a gathering place for all people. So I'm happy to support this. I'm happy to support Matthew and his team at the library, and I wish them every success.
Thank you, Councillor Bezo-Allen. Any other councillors, questions or comments on this? I would just support what both of you have said. I think that the library is a place of expanding your mind and learning, as you said, Councillor Bezo-Allen, of the diversity of how others live. And it's not about everybody has the same lifestyle and everybody has the same choices. we want our young kids, I think all of us in this community, to know about acceptance and inclusivity and acceptance of that diversity. And this is a great way to expand the minds of those who are learning those things. So I support this, and I hope it is a great success on Saturday. So all in favor? Motion carries unanimously.
That will bring us to bylaws. A motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Gardy resolved that all bylaws under item 12.1 of the agenda under date January 9, 2023, save and accept bylaw 2023-8 be approved.
All in favor? Motion carries.
And we're going to do 2023-8 separately on account of Councillor Spina's conflict. And that is a motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Gardy resolved that bylaw 2023-8 being a bylaw to appoint municipal law enforcement officers to enforce the bylaws on various private properties and to amend Schedule A to bylaw 90-305 be passed in open council this 9th day of January 2023.
All in favor? Except Councillor Spina. Motion carries.
And then I have a motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Scott. Resolved that this council move into closed session to consider one item concerning a proposed or pending disposition of land, one item concerning labor relations or employee negotiations, one item subject to solicitor-client privilege, and one item concerning education or training of members. Further be it resolved that should the said closed session be adjourned, the council may reconvene in closed session to discuss the same matters without the need for a further authorizing resolution.
All in favor?
And a motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Scott that this council now adjourn.
All in favor?